Alright guys, so it's time for my third and more than likely final Mythic Legions review. I'll explain more about that as we go through it, but if you've watched the previous two videos, you probably know what I'm talking about, but here we have it here. So we've got this new Mythic Legions. Like I said, I bought 3 of them. This one is the Deluxe Dark Templar Legion Builder. We've got them here in the package. I do really like the packaging for these Mythic Legions. I think it looks great. I like the fact that it's completely reusable, so if you want to take your figure out for a while, cool. If you want to put it back in the package to hang it up on the wall or just, you know, preserve the figure, whatever it is, package is completely reusable. You don't have to tear it open to get into it, which is a nice feature on these figures. So anyway, we got that out of the way. Let's go ahead, crack this guy open, and let's see what we think. Alright, so we got them out of the package. Let's look at accessories here real quick first. So we do get a couple of shoulder pads there. Not a lot of details on them as far as paint goes. They could use a good wash, but nicely sculpted. We get his nice long, I forget what you call these things. I should know the name of that, but I forget what you call them. Anyway, no paint on it, but it is a nice silver color as opposed to just like a plain gray paint, which is a nice upgrade from the last couple of figures that I opened up. We've got a nice shield there, which looks good. There's the piece on the back that just kind of snaps on there so he can hold it. We do have a belt here so that he can hold this right here, which is his sword. And you've got the little snap there on the back, which locks onto the belt, so he can just hook the sheath on, and then you've got the sword there. Alright, so got all that out of the way. Let's look at the figure itself, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this just because I already did in 2 previous videos. Sculpts on these things are great, and this one is no exception. It looks really good. Now, I will say, however, that one of the main things that stood out about the last 2 figures that I had was the sculpt on the unarmored parts or uncovered parts of the body. So just, you know, like a, you know, naked dude or whatever was underneath there. The muscle tone and the shading and the paint and everything on those other 2 figures, which were the Barbarian and the Gladiator, looked really good, and in fact were the best sculpted and shaded and painted parts of the figure. And here we have a figure that's just all armor. And, you know, one of the things about these is, I mean, the armor really has great detail, but no paint or wash or anything in it. And since this guy is just basically all armor, and then his upper torso is just this piece right here, there's not a lot going on here, even compared to the other 2 guys. So good sculpt. I mean, the armor looks great, but paint is basically non-existent on this thing. The only thing we really have paint on is here on the horn pieces, or whatever they're called, and they are adjustable, so you can move them around and stuff like that. Other than that, and this white cross on the chest, there's no paint on this guy at all. So you got really good sculpt and basically non-existent paint. As far as, you know, articulation goes on this guy, again, you've got single jointed knees, you've got single jointed elbows, you know, you've got the swivel at the wrist, you know, you got the ball hinge feet. You've got no articulation on the upper torso, but you do have that kind of ball joint there in the waist, and then the head is also on a ball joint, so you get, you know, a little bit of tilt and up and down, and obviously you get the rotation and everything like that. So again, like I mentioned in the last 2 videos, you're getting, you know, like 15-year-old articulation with this guy, or something similar to what you get with modern He-Man Origins stuff. So it is not the greatest articulation. This particular figure has no paint to speak of on it, but the sculpt is nice, and that's kind of where we're at. So this figure is good, certainly not great, but even by the standards of other figures in the same line that are, you know, of the same price point, it's fairly lacking. But I get why it is, because of the fact that this is a fully armored figure, and because of that, you're not going to have a lot of those details and paint and stuff like that on these figures. So, you know, it's kind of a necessity of this particular design for this, you know, knight, essentially. So, yeah, that's basically what we've got here as far as the figure itself goes. So now, let's go ahead and compare him to some other figures and see how he stacks up. All right, so obviously first up we got to compare it to the other two figures I have in the Mythic Legions line. Of course, we got the Gladiator and the Barbarian, and both these figures are better than this Crusader, just because they have better detail, especially this Gladiator figure, where you actually do get all that detailed sculpt and paint there on the upper torso and the arms and stuff like that. It's not just armor, so you're getting a lot more in your figure with one of these two than you're going to get with the Crusader. The other thing is, obviously, we've got some reused parts here. These two share the same legs, and these two share the same left arm, but that's part of the line, just in the fact that they're interchangeable, and you can kind of mix them and kit bash them and make your own figures, which is definitely a plus. But out of these three, I would definitely say that the Crusader is the least desirable. It's the least well done, but again, I understand that's a necessity of the design of an armored figure like this. Alright, so for some other 6-inch scale comparisons in a different line, obviously we got Marvel Legends here for some more kind of, you know, warrior, barbarian type, whatever you want to call them, figures. Of course, on the left we've got 80 Years Thor, on the right we've got the newer of the two Hercules figures that we've gotten recently. And honestly, like, I think both these other figures are better than this one. I mean, the armor looks really cool, and that's great, but when you look at just the variation and the paint, in addition to the sculpt and things like that that you got on these other two figures, even with, you know, Hercules, where I know not everybody likes it, but you know, you've got the paint details with the hair all over the chest and the arms and things. It just looks like more work went into these two Marvel Legends figures than went into this guy. Alright, so now we got to compare them to some armored up figures here, some other knights as it were. Of course, we got Marvel Legends Black Knight. On the right, we got the Black Knight from the Cole Obsidian Wave. On the left, we've got a custom kit bash Black Knight that I threw together. And, you know, like, sure, this Mythic Legion has a more intricate armor design. That's true, but when there's nothing there in the way of paint or a wash or something, honestly, to me, it just doesn't pop as much as these other two, whether it's the really nice detailed texturing of the scale mail kind of look, the chainmail look on the Cole Obsidian Wave one, or just the simple wash that I put on the Dr. Doom body that I used for my kit bash. Either way, I think their armor pops a little more than this guy's does. Not only does it not have a wash on it, but it's also just kind of a dark, dull gray plastic color, and it doesn't even really look like metal. So, I mean, it's just a little disappointing just on that level alone. Alright guys, now we gotta talk about price and my general thoughts on this figure. This thing sells bottom of the barrel for $45. That's pretty much the cheapest you're gonna find it, if you can find it new at retail or get it pre-ordered or something like that. Is it worth $45? And the answer is just unequivocally no. This figure's not worth 45 bucks in any way, shape, or form. I didn't think the other two figures that I had picked up were worth the $45, and this isn't even as good as those two, so it is in no way worth 45 bucks. I mean, I showed some figures. In fact, all the figures that I showed at the time that I bought them, I got them all for $20 or less, and they're all better than this. In sculpt, in articulation, in paint, everything, especially in articulation, because they have modern articulation, and this thing has articulation from the mid-2000s. I mean, he can't even hold his shield up properly. Like, if you want him to hold it up like he's actually in battle, because his elbow and his wrists don't bend enough because of old articulation, if you want him to actually hold it up straight, it covers his face. Like, you can't even position him in a way in which he's holding his shield up, but yet it doesn't cover his face. So for the purposes of display, his shield just kind of has to like hang down here, because that's really all he can do with it. It's not worth $45, guys. Even if I could make the argument some of the other figures in the line were worth more money, and certainly are better figures because of better paint and better sculpt, I can't even begin to make that argument with this one. There's just no way this is worth $45. In my opinion, this thing isn't even worth the same as a Marvel Legend at $20 to $25 because of the articulation. And again, you add no paint on this thing at all, can't hold his shield properly. It's just not a good figure. especially for the price. Okay, it's not a good figure when compared to other modern figures, and it's certainly not a good deal when it comes to price. I can't recommend this guy. Like, I could at least see with the other figures I've got, the Barbarian, the Crusader, because of the good sculpt and the good paint, how you could kind of justify it to yourself because you're paying that premium for the, you know, modularity and interchangeability of these figures as a line, and being able to swap torsos and heads and arms and legs and lower legs and hands and everything else. And there's a lot of cool kit bashing ability to these figures. But I can't say that for this one because there's just nothing there. There's nothing there to go off of. This is by far the worst of the three that I got, and I really didn't think any of them were worth the money, much less this one. So look, I can't even say like I did with the other two, I'm glad I have this one. Like, at least with the others, I'm like, yeah, it's not a great figure and it's not worth the price, but I'm still glad I have it. I'm not even glad I have this one. Honestly, there's nothing that stands out about this one. It's just not a good figure. Honestly, this is definitely one, even if you do like the line, this is one I think you could easily pass on. Because there's nothing significant in this figure, period, end of story. So, yeah, I call this one a pretty easy pass. So, there you go, guys. That's my opinion. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, let me know down below why you disagree. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.